Welcome to the Old Ways for the New Age podcast, where we weave the threads of traditional living into the tapestry of modern day life. I'm your host, Hannah, and I'm a naturopath, herbalist, and passionate plant lover here to discuss topics such as daily ritual, intentional living, witchcraft, herbal astrology, plus sharing interviews with inspiring guests, and so much more. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a podcast review if you enjoy my content. I wish to honour and express my deepest gratitude to the traditional custodians of the unceded land on which I live and record, the Wanjerabara people. I want to acknowledge their elders, past, present and emerging, and their continued connection to the land, sea and community. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey everyone, and I'm so glad you're back with us to enjoy part 2 of my conversation with Meghan Rhodes. Meghan is the herbalist and teacher behind the Heritage School of Herbal Medicine, and this is, again, part 2 of our 3-part conversation where we cover the 8 seasons of the year, kind of modelled around the 8 spokes on the wheel of the year, alongside the Ayurvedic Doshas and how Meghan blends these together to create a really holistic, grounded, seasonal herbal practice. We are starting to dive into each individual season now in this episode and in the following one. And Meghan's giving us dietary, lifestyle, and herbal recommendations for each season. I know that so many of you will get a lot out of this and be able to really take these concepts, ideas, and recommendations back and apply them in your own lives. So get settled, get cozy, and let's dive into this episode. We've touched on some really intricate systems of healing. We've touched on some seasonal rhythms, and there's a lot of great advice there for people to take and already run with and start working with. But I'd love to dive a little bit deeper and start to talk about really specific and practical ways that our audience can start to incorporate all of this knowledge and wisdom into their own lives. And so maybe we could go around the seasons and talk about like maybe some plants and some energetics and ways that, you know, people can really deepen their practice in practical, you know, realistic ways. So I'd love to start with winter if we could.
Yes.
Which for some is the witch's new year. It depends on who you are, but
yeah,
you know, that Yule, that deep winter when spring and the earth is ready to be reborn. So let's start there.
Sure. So let's go around the wheel. So yeah, Yule,
Yes.
winter solstice, that is the time of the longest night. And it doesn't usually feel like it, but technically after that, then the light is returning, you know, while you're in the midst of like, oh, it is so dark, you know, and you might still be on cozy vibes. I kind of think once the sort of general societal, you know, Christmas vibes have passed, that's when everybody gets a little bit, oh, you mean it's just cold and dark? And but it's the innermost facing season. Yeah. It's one of the seasons that's retained so many of the older traditions that are focused on keeping up our resilience, like, you know, food, fire, family, friends. Yeah. But not crazy loads of it. Yeah. This is the time to preserve your vitality, your energy, not to like just get through, but, you know, take the time to turn things off. You know, when we pause in our doing, we do, you know, we're doing less doing. Can we also do less being, as in the social obligations? You got to be this person for that person. You got to be this for that person, the other person. Can you actually just like and sit there, which for some people gets quite uncomfortable because then your intuition goes, oh, hi, me again. And maybe reminds you of something that you've been suppressing for a long time that actually it really wants you to deal with. But it's the time when kapha is very much present and continuing to build. So the cold and the wet. There might still be some undercurrents of vata as it's decreasing. That's the cold and the dry. So kind of then, you know, again, depends on climate. So it might be snowing where you are. It might not be. The more snow there is, the more kapha there is, because it's cold and it's wet and you're not going anywhere. My husband always likes to guess, oh, if we got completely snowed in, how long could we survive with like all of our food stores? I don't think we would ever have snow in this area that intense. But then again, never say never. But we kind of like the idea of like, oh, sorry, can't go anywhere. We're just gonna eat from our larder, like hang out with ourselves. But the key elements at this time are earth and water because of the kapha. But if there's ice and snow, the water is frozen. It's static. So there's that real heaviness and stillness and calmness of the earth. And it's not a busyness of the earth producing, it's the earth resting and gathering in its resources. So that's the time for us to rest, gather our resources. Not, we need to sit by that fire to keep warm, but imagine that you've got your inner fire, whether it's your personal spark or your digestive fire. We've got both going on in our bodies. So if you've got that inner fire, and think, you've got so many logs to put on that fire, and that fire's got to keep you warm and safe all winter. So if somebody says, hey, can I have one of your logs? Can I have one of your logs? So really think about who you want to give logs to and how many you want to give out, because, once the wood's in, and if it's covered in snow, it's wet. So you're not really going to be doing really well chucking that on the fire. From a kind of practical perspective, we might be starting to see some of the phlegmier illnesses come through at this time. So passing the dry coughs into the phlegm. So this is soup and stew season. This is maybe increasing the sweet taste in our foods a bit, and that means root veg, squash, things like that. It does not mean, maybe sweet tastes like licorice from a herb perspective, herb/food perspective, but this is not increasing the sugar. This is not increasing the box of chocolates, the processed stuff that's just going to cause inflammation and destruction in the body. It's a time to keep working with pungent and aromatic herbs and spices because they're warming. So they're going to keep our inner fire going. They're going to keep us physically warm, especially anybody who suffers with Raynaud's or really cold hands and feet. It's going to keep that digestive, me too, digestive fire going, cooking the food that you're putting in. Otherwise, you're just kind of putting a raw lump of food on it and your body's like, all right, well, I can't cook that. So it's just going to sit there and rot eventually, not really helpful for our bodies in terms of getting nutrients. So the pungent aromatic herbs and spices, nice and warming, also antimicrobial, which is great for this time of year. Because yes, the phlegm is building up with kapha, but it's serving a purpose. It's keeping things moist rather than letting them dry out. And it's serving like a sort of fly trap to catch microbes coming in, and then we, blow our nose and we get them out, rather than letting it come in to our entrances. So yeah, sweet, spicy, great tastes and herbs to work with at the time. Ginger, cinnamon, cloves, star anise, all of that. You could start the morning with your lemon and ginger tea. You could start it with, take all the spices that you would put in mulled wine, and instead of putting it in wine, just simmer it and make it as a tea. Yum. I mean, if you want to have the wine, on occasion, have the wine. You can also do it in, I really like to mull those spices and then put some fresh orange juice in it, which also means that what you're trying to drink is not piping hot, but don't heat the orange juice loads and loads, because then you're going to heat off the Vitsy. But that's a really nice one to keep the inner warmth in and to keep the vitamin C levels up and the antimicrobial action going, and it tastes nice. So we usually call it like orange juice tea, which is really nice.
Love that idea.
Yeah. If you've not got coating on your tongue showing that you've got toxins in the body, then it's a great time to incorporate some nourishing adaptogenic herbs. For anybody who knows, is familiar with those, because they're really nourishing and they build resilience. But because they're nourishing, if you've got a lot of coating on your tongue that shows that you've got a lot of toxins built up in the body wherever they are, and you don't want to give those toxins a free meal with the adaptogens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's only if you've got a fairly clear tongue. If you are working with your bitter herbs, they tend to be on the cold side. So if you've got them in there because you want that liver support, because it's Yule and there's a lot of, festive indulgence going on, definitely keep supporting your liver. But make sure that you are pairing it with warming herbs so you don't cool yourself down too much. Or
Mm-hmm.
rosemary, which is probably going to be in loads of the cooking this time of year anyway, which you can also have the tea first thing in the morning and really wakes up the brain in a way that, it's getting fresh oxygen there rather than caffeine is just giving you a hit and then a dip.
Mm-hmm.
Rosemary, warming, pungent aromatic, so helps with the microbes, helps keep the digestive fire going, and bitter, so supporting the liver. So you could just go for rosemary, which you're probably eating
One
lots
of
of
my
this time
personal
anyway.
favorites.
Love it. Love rosemary. Yum. And it's an opportunity to explore how much you can align with the longer nights. Can you swap out LEDs for candlelight? Can you swap out screens for crafts or a board game or a game of cards, or just staring at the fire? Or go to bed earlier. Permission slip for adults. You can go to bed between 8 and 9 p.m. It's really nice, actually. You can also decline invitations that you don't want to accept. Another, sometimes revolutionary thought. But the more toing and froing you're doing, the more vata imbalance you're stirring up, and that's causing dysregulation in the body because you're putting extra cold and extra wind into the body. And this is a time for grounding and trying to balance the cold that's already there with more warmth. So if you're adding more cold into that picture and more movement when the body wants to be still, then you're setting yourself up for when the wheel of the year turns, getting a pretty nasty cold and being exhausted.
Yeah.
So, you don't have to go to everything. If there's something you have to go to, how can you make it as enjoyable for you as possible? Or you could do something like, if you get a social invitation and it's well-meaning, but for whatever reason it just doesn't work for you to go, here's another option. You can say to that person, thank you so much for the invitation. I would love to spend time with you and celebrate XYZ. Why don't we meet up and have some and spend some quality time to celebrate that one-on-one at insert suggested venue that works for you, insert suggested time that works for you. Because, if it's somebody you care about, you want to spend time with them, but you might not necessarily want to go to some great big shindig, because if you're listening to your body's saying, I don't really want to spread, I don't want to show up at some party with all of my logs and give them to everybody when I'd rather just,
Yeah.
I'd happily share one really good log with my friend, for example. So that's a nice alternative. But enjoy that slower pace, guard your inner fire. How much less can you do? How much less do you have to be? Which also means, we talk about as a new year time for, coming into when the calendar year changes. What do you really want to carry forward into the new year? Whether you call them resolutions or manifestations or whatever. Not talking about fasting and cleansing and all that stuff. It is too cold. It is the wrong time of year. But, is there anything you've been doing or being that you put a pause on during Yule, so that as the season progresses and the wheel of the year turns, you go, actually, I've really enjoyed not doing or being that. So I don't think I'm going to start that up again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. So that's Yule, which is a whole
That was awesome.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful time of year.
Actually, I thought, and I think people will find that they end up really enjoying saying no to things. At least if you're kind of a natural introvert like me, it's awesome saying no to things, I have to say. And I've gotten really good at it over the years.
Mm-hmm. And the more you
So,
practice it, the easier it is. Because at first it feels a
mm-hmm.
bit like, and then you just get really clear, and then people know you're clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Easy.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
And so, what about the next turn? Like, where are we then transitioning into?
So the next turn is winter turning to spring. So that's Imbolc or Candlemas. That's, where I am, that's snowdrop season. So the light is starting to come back. You can actually see the sun sometimes. You see that bit of daylight. But this does not mean spring has sprung. Tra-la, put on your lovely, dresses and go frolic outside and chuck away go outside, but keep your mittens on, keep your woolly hats on, these kinds of things. Your focus is on keeping warm and dry as we slowly start to think about emerging. It's still, and again, this might shift a little bit depending on your local climate, so do apply those shifts. But at least here where I am in the UK, Kapha is still dominating. It's still cold. It's still wet, shifting more to the water element versus the earth element of Kapha, so that we see the snow starting to melt. Hydration is becoming more available to seedlings, but that also means all that protective phlegm is melting like the snow. Imagine that when you're blowing your nose incessantly. I am just snow melting. Right, making way for flowers in my nasal passages. I don't know. So the snow is melting, the runny noses are coming, all of that. Pitta is starting to accumulate, theoretically, but I know where I am, we ain't feeling it. It's like, I don't see any of that pitta around anywhere. There's a little bit of it in that kind of like life force of those first snowdrops coming up, but other than that, it's still, not enough of a level for us to feel. So it's still cold. This is not the time to purge yourself, as in cleansing, fasting, detoxing, all of this. It's cold. That type of activity needs a degree of warmth. Otherwise, it's going to be depleting rather than energizing. So if you feel like you've overindulged and you're starting to feel like a little snowdrop and you want to move a bit more, get that gentle movement going physically. Yeah. If you're sick of all your, Yuletide spices, switch a bit more to the savory. Maybe start adding in a bit of those salty notes as well to get the minerals in, because the salty will flush the body through, but also help to remineralize, because we don't want to deplete ourselves. But, your food still needs to be cooked. It still needs to be warm. No salads, no smoothies, no juices. No. It's too cold. Yeah. Your body doesn't have enough fire from without, from outside of you to deal with really cold things being put in you. It will just dampen, put out the little bit of fire you have. It's like if you've got a gas stove, your burner's on the low setting. Yeah, it's on. There are flames, but it's not like it's on high, because there's just enough to cook your food. So keep the warm things, keep the nourishing things, your broths. It's a good time for seaweeds. Seaweeds bring in, the salty taste and all that lovely nourishment, the minerals, but they're also grabbing toxins and pulling out the body without doing, the super juicer type of thing. Now, that being said, don't go crazy nuts on seaweeds, because there is sort of a threshold of how much seaweed you want to have in a day, because they will collect toxins from the sea as well, and you don't want to have too much of that because then you've potentially got exposure to that in your body. So small amounts, little and often kind of thing. Nettle soup, if you've got young nettles near you, or just your nettle tea. It's very grounding. It's a new taste. Like I said, if you're getting bored of the spicy things, switching to the savory things, gently increasing that physical activity, gently starting to stretch your limbs. Like, don't start training for your marathon. At this point, this is like, I think I'm going to go back to yoga class, or I think I'm going to go for a daily walk, if you don't have a dog that you've got to walk every day anyway, kind of thing. This is maybe a bit of like qigong, kind of, just like really chill movements, but we're moving, we're stretching. Yeah. If you stay totally stagnant, then you're saying, I'll just have more of that kapha. Kapha is already dominating. You don't want to be snowballing more of that to take into the next season. So do get things gently moving. And again, consider, continue to think about what you want to say yes to now. And with every yes is a no. And you could think with every no is then a yes, right? Everything you say no to is a yes to something else you get to do or be or not. Just yes, I just want to chill. Like, yes, actually, I don't feel like driving today. I'm just going to stay home. Which is not to say be flaky. Like, don't flake out on people. That's not nice.
No.
But the key to not flaking out on people is listening to your intuition thoroughly enough so that when you originally get the opportunity, the invitation, whatever it is, that you can give an authentic yes or no to that rather than I feel like I really have to, and then ditching at the last minute. Don't do that.
100%. Yeah,
you'll feel rubbish. They'll be
thing.
upset. Yeah, don't do that.
And if you really, really need your salads, try like a roasted root veggie salad with like some really nicely cooked grains and like a herbal dressing that's warm. Like, you can do it if you're like addicted and that's like the thing that brings you joy to eat for lunch. I mean, do it in a way that is seasonally warm and cooked.
Yeah, you can't. Yes, the warm and cooked salads. Yeah, but not the like iceberg lettuce and the raw tomatoes and the all of that. No, keep it cooked and it gives you more scope and more opportunity to get creative about how you're making your favorite salads.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is an unexpected perk of living seasonally, is that it creates so much more room for creativity. You can get creative because you have to get creative because, we are limiting ourselves in some ways, but it's kind of like when people say you need to be bored because it fosters creativity. It's good to give our brains and bodies space to I guess, dream again and experiment. And also, we have so many options available to us at all times now in modern society. It's like being able to have because how many people do you know who go to the grocery store and they're like, I just buy the same thing every time because I get overwhelmed by being in the grocery store. So, by living seasonally, eating seasonally, practicing herbalism seasonally, we get to get creative with what we have available, and we don't have as much of that overwhelm constantly.
And you've got something to look forward to. A little like these 8 seasons, they're only kind of 6. Some of them are nearly a full 2 months, but they're usually about 6 weeks. That think if you went to a Michelin star fine dining restaurant that was all like, we grow all our own food and then we create it and then we give you this little amazing tasting little pea-sized thing on your plate, right? But their menu is changing like every 2 weeks. There's something to look forward to. There's something to be said for, and now it's sweet potato season, rather than I can have them whenever, or and now I'm going to really enjoy the tomatoes, and then tomato season is finished, or now it's I can't wait for the first strawberry of the season. Amazing. And then you enjoy them because you know that when they're gone until next year, but then there's something else to look forward to.
Absolutely. So where does that take us next on the wheel? About Ostara?
Yes, spring, the equinox, equal day and night, which I think it's really cool. And I personally find that around the equinoxes is like the optimal time for sunrise and sunset to be. Like here it's around kind of
Mm.
7ish. All right, 7ish. I'll get up now. I'm happy with that. Okay, 7ish, like time to be, bedtime routine and getting into the evening and, and saying no to things outside the house. Yeah, that's good. I like it. But maybe it's just, being in a season and going, oh, I love this season. And then you go to the next one and you're like, nice. Because each of them
Mm-hmm.
has their own things to savor. So yeah, this is tipping towards the longer days until we eventually reach the solstice, the longest day. And we don't need to, our bodies don't need to hold on to nutrients and internal warmth quite as tightly because we're starting to get more of it in exchange with our environment and with the rest of nature around us. So we can start to relax a bit, start to release, start to let go a little bit. So if you've been like bursting at the seams to do some kind of detox, like now you can do one. Like in Ayurveda, there's the Khichdi cleanse, which is not stop
Mm-hmm.
eating. It's eating, a particular dish called Khichdi, which you can put all kinds of different spices and herbs in to bring a little bit of variety to it. And it's basically kind of as pre-cooked, pre-digested as possible. So you're getting the core kind of baseline nourishing things that you need, but your body doesn't have to work so hard, so it can
Mm-hmm.
reset. So I like to think of it as a spring release rather than a spring cleanse, like a release or a reset. So
Yeah.
resetting fresh perspectives, fresh intentions, fresh habits. Many of my students, as we do the wheel of the year, they really like spring equinox Astara as their time to set their new year intentions or manifestations.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than 1st of January. I'm still kind of stuck in the 1st of January thing, but to be completely honest, because there's this debate about when exactly is the witch's new year, and some say it's at Samhain. It's usually around Samhain time when I'm kind of starting to put together my manifestation for the next year board list configuration thing, so that I've got it kind of I'm already kind of thinking ahead, and I'm sort of massaging things so that by the time we get to calendar 1st of January, then I'm like, yes, and then I do my little card pull for the year and all that good stuff. So yeah,
Necessities.
yes, necessities. No, I will not be going to that New Year's party because I'm doing a card spread and I'm manifesting. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm
Important
saying.
business.
Yes, to important priorities. So, yeah, the spring equinox, we're releasing what we've outgrown. The earth is growing, the flowers are growing, the baby lambs and chicks are being born, if that's what's going on near you. This is that last bit of kapha doing that like flush out of the system, and we can start to feel the pitta accumulating. And again, depending where you are, you might feel it more intensely than other places. Earth is dominating again. It's giving that the solidness from which more life can come. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's generally speaking. But again, what does it look like and feel like to you? Late March through early April in the Northern Hemisphere. So flip that in the Southern Hemisphere. Are you still getting fresh snow? Or has it all melted and gone? Are the baby animals jumping about or not quite? So what do you need to focus more on for not only where you are, but what is it like this year? Yeah, do you need to
Mm-hmm.
focus, keep drying up that excess kapha with some more astringent herbs, drying herbs, so you're not carrying it forward into the rest of the year? And that might be as well if you've got more kapha in your constitution. If you're just a phlegmier person, you might need to focus more. You might need to focus on drying up the phlegm all year,
Yeah.
because that kapha pot is bigger for you. Do you need to keep more warmth in your food, in your herbs, in your daily life, or is your focus based on what's going on around you able to shift more towards making sure that the pitta that's accumulating isn't starting to really gain momentum with the heat. Because if you're really gaining momentum where you are with heat at the spring equinox, by the time you get to summer solstice, you're just going to be on fire all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So now is when you're prepping to mitigate that. And that's really 2 seasons ahead. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
this is your time for your nettles, for your dandelion leaf. I love ground ivy, Glaucoma hyderaceae, especially for kapha types who are really, really phlegmy in the chest and maybe congested in the sinuses. It's got a really metallic taste to it. Used to be called the painter's herb because it pulls lead and heavy metals out the body. So a good one to incorporate anyway, if you're exposed to lots of heavy metals, and not just musically speaking. Although I don't know, I haven't tested it on, heavy metal exposure via, the ears, shall we say. But ground ivy is a really nice one. Your plantain, your cleavers. And again, if it's still cold where you are, keep that fresh ginger in. There is no official date at which you have to stop with the fresh ginger. Check the environment around you. If it is warm, and you feel warm, stop with the ginger. If it is still cold, even though the sun is shining and the birds are chirping and it's beautiful, keep the fresh ginger in. And fresh ginger is not as hot as dried powdered ginger. So people who find ginger to be too spicy, try a little sliver of fresh ginger. And if it kind of makes you feel like things are racing a bit, then check your hydration levels, because that can help to be able to, for the body to like ginger. And if your body just completely hates ginger, then listen to your body. Don't put it in. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Nettle soup drizzled with rosemary infused oil. So you're still keeping that bit of warmth in and the digestion in the liver, but you're also getting all the minerals in and the cleansing. And cleavers water in the UK, just put your fresh ginger in. Don't even think about it. It's going in. And have it room temperature, not cold. Your cold infusions mean room temperature, not in the fridge. You can drink your tea warm instead of piping hot. Herbal body oiling from Ayurveda is one of my favorite parts of Ayurveda. And that you can do all year round, except basically in the summers when it's contraindicated. But it's a great way to keep the warmth in, work with your seasonal herbs, have the lymph moving, have some movement in the body, but also some nourishment. And keep cooking your food. So again, for our salad fans out there, keep it, your warm grain salads, your warm dressings with your, you can change up. You maybe can back off the squash now. You might be totally sick of it anyway, but change things up, but keep them still warm and cooked. Yeah.
Amazing. So let's jump into Beltane, the season of Beltane.
So Beltane, also known as May Day, top of May. Think of, your maypole dancing and that whole celebration of fertility and life's coming back to the land and flower crowns and all of this. But I know for in the UK where I am, and in the north of the UK, May Day can still be freezing. Can still be, there are not flowers out yet. It can still be, the last frost may not have happened. So we are waiting. It's that moment of waiting to be able to finally do some direct sowing of seeds, planting out, if you've been starting seedlings. And it's opposite to the wheel of the year on Samhain. And this clicked for me finally when I was chatting a couple years ago with another Australian podcaster, because I couldn't get my head around, but wait a minute, how would the veil is thin. They're they're directly opposite each other on the wheel. So I like to think of it as at Samhain, the veil is thin, kind of looking backwards, so reaching towards the ancestors. And for Beltane, the veil is thin, but reaching forwards, sort of bringing the new life in, bringing in the new, the new children, the new life, the new seeds, all of that. So we're reaching forwards as opposed to reaching backwards at this time. In an Ayurvedic perspective, this is when those last bits of kapha are overflowing. So kapha is starting to decrease. Like finally the phlegm is leaving the picture, hopefully, unless you've been feeding that phlegm, and then you're just going to get more phlegm, right? So we don't want to keep carrying the phlegm forward round the whole wheel, because eventually it's like walking through quicksand or mud or molasses. You don't want to build up this molassesy, phlegmy world for yourself to walk
Ideally
through.
not.
Ideally not. So those last bits of kapha are overflowing, and pitta is really starting to accumulate and gain momentum. Finally, we're starting to feel that, like, oh, the warmth is coming back. Oh, the life is coming back. But for some, depending on where you are, pitta might be in full bloom, right? You might have all the flowers and the flower crowns and the glory, everybody's in their sundresses already dancing around the maypole, or you might still be in your coats. So it depends on where you are, but that pitta is rising. It's starting to get traction. Again, it's a transition season, so it can toggle back and forth. You might get this, yay, glorious warm days, and then, oh, wait, it's cold again,
Yeah.
so that going back and forth. We're not turning up the heat too much, because we don't want to set ourselves up for overheating as we go forward. So embrace the warmth, but it's not the time to go like, right, everything is, hot and toasty and fiery, because then when summer comes, you're going to get it. Because you'll have built up way too much. So from a herbal perspective, May Day is very much associated with hawthorn and May flowers. Yeah. So the flowering top, so the flowers plus the leaves with hawthorn, your yarrow leaves. It's often not peaking in flower yet. We're more in the leaf stage. Nettles are still great at this time. Dandelions, plantain, ground ivy, one of my favorites. And ground ivy particularly, it's got that great affinity for the lungs and clearing things out. So it's quite bitter and it's quite pungent. And it's got that bit of a metallic taste to it, because it's quite specific for flushing heavy metals out the body, particularly lead. It used to be called the painter's herb, with lead in the paint. So if you're in that zone where the phlegm is still there in the lungs and you want to clear it, then get into the ground ivy. Shift that out, and some peppermint is starting to come through, where you've got that proper aroma to it. So those herbs are coming to the fore, and we can start lightening up our food a little bit. Still keep it cooked, but it can be a little bit lighter, unless it's still freezing where you are, then don't. But your warm tea, room temperature cold infusions, your foot baths, keep on body oiling, unless your landscape is bursting into a glorious heat-filled blaze. Keep on with the body oiling, because you want to keep that nourishment in, keep that protection in, keep grounding yourself, keep that moisture in. So Beltane is Beltane is when we wait until we start sowing our seeds here, where I am in the north of the UK. I don't bother with anything outside until Beltane has passed. Maybe we're prepping the beds, but not planting out before then, because I've just learned it's not worth it. There's going to be a frost still that will come and it will smack you, and there you go. and that's a bummer. So don't do that. Don't do that. And then as we move forward, we've got summer solstice. So some call it Letha, but that's, the end of June. That's that period where you've got maximum sunshine. I love summer solstice as a person. As a mother with a small child, is summer solstice my favorite? Mommy, why is it still bright sunshine out and I'm in bed? And that's one of those, not quite because I said so moments, but because I said so, because it's bedtime. And we have explanations about what's happening with the sun, and we read some poems and some stories and whatnot, but you're still in bed and it's bedtime now.
Yeah.
But that's that big, I think of solstice as that big out breath, that big open, that big release, that big like stand outside and soak up all the sun, put your face up and put your arms out and just open up your energy so that you can get all of that goodness in. But it is starting to be a time when daily rhythms can get lost. As we get towards if you're doing a schooling rhythm where you're not doing your schooling in whatever form over the summer, we're creeping towards that bit, end of June, school might be out or school might be wrapping up. And when school's out, then you're in this sort of, I was going to call it a wasteland, but that sounds quite negative. This liminal
I get
space
it.
of like,
Yeah.
how do we, okay, we've got to keep the rhythm. Otherwise, everything just goes to pot. Yeah. So it's that time where you're starting to kind of find what is our summer rhythm going to be, because we don't necessarily have that regular cadence of the school run or forest school on a Tuesday or whatever it is. So finding that new rhythm. And even if you don't have kids who are in school or little children, it's that time where, even when I used to work in corporate, summertime, everybody takes holiday, which is great, right? So it
Yeah.
becomes this thing of like, if you're sitting in a corporate job and you're supposed to be tracking your hours of specifically like, I did these 3 hours on this account, and then I did this, and then I did this amount of time for administrative work, and then you get in this bit where you're like, if you're not on holiday, what am I logging here?
Yeah.
So finding that rhythm that's maybe got a bit more space, that's got a bit more flex, that's got a bit more openness to it, but finding some kind of rhythm and keeping it is really, really helpful for not getting completely lost in space, because what's coming after the summer seasons is autumn, and that's Vata time. And Vata is already, if it's out of balance, Vata is already like, where am I? Like, what am I
Yeah.
doing? When did I eat? What day is it? Oh, I forgot to do that, So you
Yeah.
don't want to be building that up in a complete lack of rhythm. So even if it's really spacious, definitely, summer solstice comes, get going with your summer spacious rhythm so that you've got something to ground yourself with.
I can definitely see, particularly with like how you're describing that with the Vata kind of. I see a little bit of that, especially towards like the late summer.
Mm.
Um, where I think this is definitely, obviously we're talking about the northern hemisphere. Things are a bit different in the southern hemisphere. And
Yeah.
like where I live, the sun really doesn't go down later than like 7 or 7:30 at night ever. Like that's in summer.
Mm.
So it's
Mm.
a little easier just to keep those rhythms, but being over in Canada for the summer, I can totally see how those rhythms get lost, because it's like you've gone through some portal and you're in, a different land, and everything is just
Yeah.
late, and people are out doing things they wouldn't do any other time of year, and they're doing like they're
Yeah.
like doing surfing at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, and
Mm.
kids are out on the streets, and it's just so interesting because I can totally see how there's like a loss of that time and space because
Yeah.
concept, and if and I think you can forget to eat and things like that. So I get what you mean, like if you're building that up already and then you go into the autumn, you're not really setting yourself up to be able to withstand that kind of that next set of energy. And
Yes.
we're heading into like that cold and flu season, so that makes total sense to me.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because when I teach the Wheel of the Year in the second year to my students, we're also learning the Ayurvedic, seasonal rhythms, and also the Ayurvedic daily rhythm, the Dinacharya. There's a kind of daily flow of this chunk of time is Kapha time, this is Vata time, this is Pitta time, and it cycles day and night. And so there's certain activities and certain ways of being, things you might want to do that are more optimal for those times of day so that you've got more flow. And I say to my students, however, Ayurveda comes from the Indian subcontinent. The the wiggle room, the stretch of daylight there versus the stretch of daylight in the UK is not nearly as dramatic, like you're saying. So even though um, even though there's still daylight, but you may be in kapha bit of evening time. So that's, supposed to be slowing down to, getting ready for bed, turning inwards, these kinds of things. If you've got more sun, if it's still light out wherever you are, keep the kind of slow, gentle kapha vibe. But you could do something like evening gardening, going outside. We do this sometimes. We go out and just do a bit of not stressful weeding, because weeding can be intense, but gentle, just going through the beds and just pulling things out, and you've got your hands in the soil. That's a very kapha type thing to do for that time of day. You've got the fresh air, you've still got the sunlight, but it is setting gradually, so you've got a bit more time to do that. Whereas in the times when there's less light, you don't need to be doing as much weeding and out in the garden, because maybe things have been put to bed. So we can work with the timings as they stretch and flex across the different seasons as well. We get a bit more space. Go outside and do some grounding activities. This is a great time of year to, if it's not a regular habit for you, or if it just doesn't work because it's here it's pitch black at 4, in maybe a month it's pitch black at 5 here now. So you might not want to go for an evening stroll after dinner, but summer solstice, absolutely go for an evening stroll after dinner, just gently helping you digest, sum up the day, process things. There are lots of options. Mm-hmm. And just like with the opposite of the winter solstice, we go, the light is returning, and we're like, really? I mean, I know, but really? Same with summer solstice. It's like, not to be a bummer, because everybody's going, yay, sunshine. But this is also the bit when the nights are creeping in more. So we don't have to go, oh man, that's it, it's all downhill from here. But appreciating those bits of sun, those bits of light that we do get. Yeah. Paying attention, like we said, vata is very slowly starting to accumulate. So don't go too crazy. Go on holiday, travel, but maybe not the kind of thing where it's pinging to a million different places. Boom, 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 boom. That's travel is vata disturbing, and going very quickly from one place to another is also vata disturbing. So if you're going to go somewhere, go, settle in, enjoy, come back, settle back in, recalibrate, and give yourself that time rather than rushing. You go on a massive holiday and then come back, and then the next day you're in the office and straight back into everything. That vata hasn't had time to ground and settle. So that's whipping up, and we don't want to whip that up, like we said, in advance of vata season coming.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the summer solstice, pitta is high. So like we said before, it's accumulating, but don't get too excited, because you don't want the hot coming. So that hot might manifest as irritation or prickly heat or bloating. Getting into that time of year where for some people it's like no matter what they eat, they can't do right for wrong, and they just bloat or they feel uncomfortable, and it's all a bit too much heat in the body. So cooling things down. Coriander is one of my favorites for this. We made this year with my students a coriander hydrosol at our summer gatherings. Yeah, which was perfect because we thankfully had an amazing summer this year. So we were in the yurt, which is fully insulated for the majority of the year, which meant that we were roasting.
Oh my goodness.
We had to cover like the crown skylight eventually with a kind of a shade to keep us all from just completely melting. I was like, right, we're making coriander hydrosol, and everyone's just like, mist. And that stuff was brilliant all summer.
Oh, yeah, that sounds so good.
But yeah, it's a time to shift towards lighter, smaller meals,
Mm-hmm.
but don't go super cold. If you go super cold and super raw for everything, your body's still got to process that, and it's already dealing with lots of heat outside. So think then it's like you've got to turn the heat up really high inside to cook it if it's you're cooking from scratch. So give it something to work with. Have it still cooked, but on the lighter side.
Would you say that like Ayurveda again is not my specialty? I know
Mm,
I basic working understanding, but I would imagine it has a lot of similarities with traditional Chinese medicine. Would
mm,
Ayurveda consider generally not having fully raw meals at all? Like is that
yeah,
like with TCM? It's too
yeah,
cold. Your digestive system needs to have that burning digestive fire at all times. So you
mm-hmm,
probably wouldn't recommend cold meals at all unless I guess if you're in Australia and you are in 42-degree weather, you might
yeah,
want a cold meal, but I guess it's a little bit different. It's the reason why I don't have any of my drinks cold. Pretty much, I pretty much only I don't drink my water cold. I don't
yeah,
want to add that kind of. I don't want to dampen my digestive fire, and so you probably
exactly.
would recommend that, right? Generally, like
Same.
incorporating cooked elements always.
Yeah, yeah. Even, think about if you're having, you can have a cold soup, but you've cooked the soup and then you eat it colder. But yeah, Ayurveda does not like raw food. Definitely not, even if you are having raw food summer solstice time, definitely not after 4,
Okay, that's a good
because you've
recommendation.
you've got to have time to digest it. So if you're a big like leafy salad fan, have that for lunch, not for
Mm-hmm.
dinner. Yeah.
I like that.
Um yeah. And no, on that same note, no ice. And I know like really hot parts of Australia. I know, past life me living in Florida, like, what do you mean no ice? I can't survive without ice. But cool or room temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Ice is too cold for the digestive fire, so it's counterproductive. Get your
Mm-hmm.
hydrosols out. Mist, 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 mist. Yeah. Your
Yeah.
cooling herbal baths, your cold infusions, that means room temperature. Your
Mm-hmm.
fresh culinary herbs, but not your super cold stuff. And I would say
Yeah.
definitely work very consciously with the sunlight. Think about charging up your battery for the times of the year when it's dark. And I can't remember if I mentioned before, because I always mention this book to everybody I talk to because I love it. But Renegade Beauty by Nadine Artemis,
Mm.
she's got a fantastic chapter in there on healthy sun exposure, and just very straight talking, clear, the facts to the point, and it's but written nicely. It's
Yeah.
a really nice one, which is great. And an Ayurvedic trick this time of year is gazing at bodies of water. Anything that's the color blue is very cooling and calming for pitta, that red, orange, fire, hot.
Yeah.
So the perfect thing to do for this time of year is go to the beach, or
Mm-hmm.
go to a lake, go to a body of water, look at the water. If you're very pitta like me and you're like, I don't want to get in that because I'm all fired. I want to be on it. They just gaze at it. You don't have to go in, but just
Yeah.
gaze
I'm
at
a
it.
I'm a gazer. I'm a gazer.
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, not tempting. No. Yeah. And St. John's Wort,
Mm.
remember, peaks at summer solstice. St. John's Day, also known as the summer solstice, but that's your peak herb then. And if you're making your St. John's Wort oil, you need that fresh. So that is the time. That's when we're all like watching our St. John's Wort, going, is it ready? Is it ready? Is it in bloom? Is it? We're rubbing it like,
Absolutely.
is it purpley enough on my fingers? Yes. Okay. Oil, 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 oil making. Yeah, but not body oiling this time because you'll burn yourself. So
Yeah.
this is the time to take a break.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be helpful for people. I know I could hear all the Australians going, what do you mean? That when do the cold foods come in? But I think, it's good to remember that this is, whilst they feel good on your external self, your internal self doesn't so much love them. So it's good to have that balance. I like the idea of a hydrosol and working with that, whilst also just having things maybe more of a room temp, rather than just like cold all the time, even though it feels crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you look at a lot of the ancient traditions, the ancient practices, the ancient wisdom. I remember my mom said to me recently, because she was talking to somebody about parasites and the dynamics of that, which is a whole other kettle of fish. And whoever she was talking to said, "Oh no, of course I don't eat anything raw. I wouldn't eat raw food. It's not, it dampens the digestive fire." And so my mom tells me this and I'm like, yes. Yeah. She's like, how have I not gotten this memo? I'm like, I don't know. But yeah, I will have some raw fruit, or a little bit of raw veg this time of year. But again, you have it earlier in the year. But once you get into the colder months, you definitely need to be, stew your fruit, cooking things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, we can do things like, for people listening, adding making a nice salad dressing with maybe an acid and, some warming spices. And there's like ways to do it very lightly sauteing rather than like frying the hell out of it, but there's ways to do it, roasting them and then cooling them and eating things that way. There's like, I like the idea of a bit of raw fusion. That's kind of fun for here because obviously it gets crazy. And people are very used to their kind of raw foods. Like an Aussie Christmas is, is a very raw food scented and like cold food scented. So we don't want to take that away. Like, I understand, but there's ways you can work with it that make it appropriate for you and better for your digestive system. It's not going to have such a heavy impact. I think it's something, especially the Western world, just doesn't consider. It's like, that's just not something that is in our toolbox, is thinking about the form in which we're having our food. It's like, oh yeah, it's food. But, it does kind of make a difference, and our digestive system is responsible for so much, including the function of our nervous systems, which we all know need as much love as they can get. So, it's, what do they say? It's not what you eat, it's what you assimilate. So if we can focus on supporting our digestive systems, we can support the rest of our bodies as well. So it's really good advice.
Definitely. Yeah. Keep those culinary herbs in all the time. Yes. They will always be helpful. Yeah.
What are your kind of top, so for Litha, like summer solstice, what are your kind of top 3 or 4 plants you would work with? You've mentioned coriander.
Coriander, definitely. Cilantro. Yeah, or cilantro. Peppermint. Definitely. Nice and cool. Lemon balm.
Oh, love lemon balm.
And rose.
Oh, and
yeah. Rose petals, chamomile, lavender. Really nice this time of year. And of course, St. John's wort.
Of course.
Yeah, of course, St. John's wort. Yes, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, all those, just keep them cool. Keep them cool. Yeah. And the ones that are peaking this time of year are going to give you that anyway.
Definitely. Yeah, it's always good to just look at what is thriving. And you can look them up online, find out what zone you're in. And there's lots of resources available to try to figure out what is going to peak in your area and when to plant things. So, that's easily accessible online these days.